future consequences of the crackdown on illegal immigration. I think as time moves on, more and more towns are starting to pass laws against illegal immigration, housing, employment, etc., healthcare, the border closing. What's going to happen in the future if we do not, if we continue the route of shutting this down? What will happen in the future is these Mesoamericans are going to find themselves homeless because no one will rent to them because they're illegal. They're going to find themselves unemployed because no one will hire them because they're illegal. They will then find themselves in the streets of America. You'll notice the homeless population will skyrocket because they're afraid to go back to Mexico. Unless, of course, we can give them the inspiration to go back in the civil rights movement, to take the country back, then they will go with that inspiration. But if that doesn't happen, they're stuck here in the United States. And they'll be committing crimes. And also, just their very presence will make them illegal. Because municipalities across the country are, because they're so frustrated with homelessness, they are selectively legislating laws against people who are vagrants and homeless. And they are enforcing laws specifically against these people. I believe that there's something very sinister going on in this country. And that if the United States of America is to be an economic superpower in the 21st century in the area of manufacturing, America has got to find a source of cheap labor. Slaves. Our minimum wage laws or our labor laws does not allow for free America to have slaves. How, therefore, will America compete with products made in different parts of the world, third world countries that employ slaves? We can't. Well, our cheap labor market, slaves, cheap labor force. I'm beginning to realize where they're going to get that cheap labor force. The Constitution of the United States, 13th Amendment, which freed black people from slavery, added this part, though. Slavery in America is abolished except in prison. Except in prison. In other words, prison industrial complex. You could put people in prison to work and you don't have to pay them anything. Or pay them minimally. Whatever you want to pay them. Because they violated the law. I got a funny feeling that all these homeless people eventually are going to find themselves in former military bases turned into labor camps, owned and operated by private industries. Slavery, prison industry, slavery is one of the fastest growing industries in America. You could buy stock in slavery, prison industrial complex in Wall Street. That's why you don't have good schools. And if you notice something, all the urban centers where most black people live are run by Democrats, and black Democrats as well. Yet look at the school systems of all those cities. What's going on? Because if these young people got education, they would do good with their lives. But because they're uneducated, they're only good for labor work. But before that, they commit crimes, become homeless. They go to prison, and they put to work for the rest of their lives. I also see possibly, just a theory, one of the reasons for the open borders, porous borders, as it were, and no real serious crackdown by the federal government, because there's a lobby somewhere in Washington, D.C., that says America needs a cheap labor force in the 21st century. Where are we going to get them from? Well, here comes the Companeros. But the American people are backlashing. The border closes. Everything shuts down for them. They become street vagabonds and criminals. Where they go? To the labor camps. I got a document here. Hold on, please. This was found in the back of the LA Times. Page A22. It's just a little blurb here. U.S. terror law covers immigrants. Immigrants. I don't like them to use that word immigrants because they're not immigrants. They're invaders. Immigrants are people who come to this country, and like in any other country, and go through the processes to become a citizen. Then you're an immigrant. These people are illegal, but that's okay. They want to use the word immigrant. That's fine with me. Immigrants arrested in the United States may be held indefinitely on suspicion of terrorism and may not challenge their imprisonment in civilian courts, the Bush administration said, opening a new legal front in the fight over the right of detainees. In court documents filed with the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia, the Justice Department said a new anti-terrorism law being used to hold detainees at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, also applied to foreigners arrested and held in the United States. There it is. There it is. That's how this country is going to meet its cheap labor force, cheap labor needs. I'm beginning to understand why they let the borders open like that. I believe there's another way for America to have a cheap labor force and compete in the global market without slavery, without violating our Constitution. I mean, of course, the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, where it says slavery is abolished in America except in prison, that's part of the Constitution. That's what I would call constitutional slavery. But we don't need that. There's a way of dealing with that. And I don't want to see the Indio people, the poor compañeros who are running from oppression in Mexico, to come up here and find themselves slaves forever in a concentration camp. That's my concern as to why this is going on.